All right, this is it. This is the final chapter, the final week of our online instruction. I certainly pray that in the fall we'll be back to normal, back in the classroom, and I hope those returning are excited about that as well. I know a couple of you won't be back because you'll be off to bigger and better things, and I pray the best for you. Let's start off. This chapter, you can see my face is kind of blocking it here. Shrink me down a little bit. Reports. So chapter 12 is on the audit reports. Reports on audited financial statements. This hopefully will be my shortest discussion yet. It's a fairly straightforward chapter, and there are some great little flow charts that we can look at to help us get to some of our answers that we may have questions to. Let's start with a little devotion, though. This is from Rebecca, and she lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is our devotion for today. I pressed through the church doors, gripping the handle, unsure about entering. It had been a year since my husband's death. His funeral was the last time I was at church. What if I burst out in tears when the music starts? What if someone talks to me? As these thoughts were flooding my head, one word broke through: rise. It seems like an odd word, but it interrupted the agony. Hoping to be invisible, I found a spot in the back. It came to me again: rise. Annoyed, I told myself, I'm just here to see how it goes. The music began, and before I knew it, tears began to fill my eyes. I fought them, convincing myself that now was not the time. Before I could stop them, I heard the word again: rise. I grabbed a tissue and held my breath. Please, just start the sermon. The teaching started, and I suddenly understood this word from a different perspective. It's not the suffering, rejection, and death that won. Death lost. Jesus rose, and so will I. As the service ended, my heart pumped with new life despite my tears. No matter your struggle, beloved in Christ, we rise. Okay, so that's from Rebecca. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. And now let's look at chapter 12. All right, I'm going to shrink down a little bit more so I don't block any of the screen as I go along. All right, so let's get to the meat and potatoes, which is here with our first learning objective, which is kind of understanding the report, understanding the unmodified report, which, again, my terminology during my time in school was called unqualified. Now it's called unmodified. So somewhere in there it changed. Regardless, it's pretty similar in terms of the wording, so it's not too much to worry about. Let's look at the standard report. So here it is. So this would be a clean opinion. Now this does say non-public, okay? So we're talking about, not a PCAOB report, okay? So I'll tell you what's missing here in just a minute. So let's blow this up a little bit, okay? Make it a little bit bigger because my eyes are bad. Again, the book uses Dunder Mifflin. I actually had to go back and look at some office videos the other day. I like the CPR one. It just cracks me up. The CPR training. I can't watch that enough. But anyway, let's bring it down a little bit. Excuse me. So first off, let's see who's it addressed to. Okay, it's addressed to the board of directors and the shareholders of the company. In this case, remember, non-public. It can still be a corporation. They can still have stock issued, but they're not on public exchanges. They're not on the New York Stock Exchange. Again, Chick-fil-A is a classic example. It's got stock. We can't buy it because it's all owned by the family, more or less. All right. Starts off with the introductory paragraph. Okay. We have audited the accompanying statements, and it does spell out all of the financial statements plus the notes. Okay, so all those will be identified there. Excuse me. We also got a management responsibility section, which essentially we try to put it all on management because ultimately it's their statements, not ours. It says here that management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of these statements in accordance with GAAP. This includes the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal controls. Okay, Let's go on to the responsibility. Okay, so the management is responsible, and they must follow, U.S. GAAP, essentially. All right. The auditor's responsibility, okay? Our responsibility is to give an opinion. That's what it says right there, okay? And we're going to conduct it, and we're going to conduct the audit not with GAAP, but with GAS, right? So the generally accepted auditing standards of the U.S. Okay, so remember, management must follow GAAP. Auditors must follow GAS, okay? Those standards require that we plan, perform, okay, obtain reasonable assurance. We've talked about reasonable assurance all semester long. Hopefully you know what that is by now. Okay, it does try, this next paragraph, it talks about the whole basis for it being reasonable assurance, okay, talking about, a test basis, somewhere in here, I don't want to read all this. It's kind of trying to discuss a little bit the limitations, okay. In making those risk assessments, the auditors consider internal controls. Remember, we talked about internal controls. If we're going to rely on them, it'll affect the nature, timing, and extent. Okay, because we're relying on the controls a little bit, or because we're not going to test every single transaction, there is reason that there's a possibility we could be wrong, right? Anyway, the bottom line here, though, is look at the last sentence. We believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our audit opinion. Okay? And then down here at the bottom is the clean opinion. Okay? In our opinion, the statements... Really? My dog's chewing a bone now. The financial statements referred to above present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of Dunder Mifflin, and its results of operations and its cash flows for the year ended in accordance with GAAP, right? Okay, so there's the clean report. You see it right there. Here's the 4 sections that we just kind of discussed. It's well worth coming back here and reading them. Here, I'll do a full fancy highlight, even though, obviously... you can come in there and look at that in your own ebook without any trouble. Okay. Be signed using the firm's name, right? So down here it says, Michael, I can't read that, Sears LLP. That's the name of the accounting firm, right? All right. So it's signed with the name of the firm. And it's dated with the date when the auditors have. So it's essentially the date that we completed the audit. Come here, get this out of here. Big dummy. All right. Now this is for public entities. So essentially it's the same thing. The big difference down here is after the clean opinion, we'll have an internal control paragraph. Okay. In other words, it's saying, hey. You gotta. We also audited the internal controls, and we've given an opinion on them, and you can refer to that opinion. Okay, in other words, kind of go check out that opinion. Is more or less what it's saying. Let me read it real quick. We have also audited, in accordance with the standards of the PCAOB, the effectiveness of the internal controls based on the criteria in the framework. All right. Issued by the COSO and expressed an unqualified opinion thereon. So we're kind of saying, hey, we checked their internal controls, they were good, giving them a chance to go look at them as well. So the only difference between the public accounting firm and the non-public accounting firm essentially is the addition of this internal control paragraph to the public firm, the public clients, okay, to public clients. All right. Now down here, we've got our 4 opinions listed, which we've discussed these in class before. So hopefully this is nothing new. You've got your unmodified opinion. That's the clean one. Okay, no problems. Everything looks fair, right? The wording there would be the statements fairly represent the financial position of the client. All right. Qualified. Here's the 2 words here. Except for. That's the except for opinion. In other words, we found one problem. It may be material. It's not doesn't like make you change your opinion, but it might be material. So we need to point that out with a qualified opinion. We'll go over that more in a minute. Okay, the adverse opinion. Remember, that's the negative one. The statements do not present the financial condition, right? Do not fairly present, all right? And then finally is the disclaimer. We do not express an opinion. Now, this is one of those weird, usually it's because after the fact we realized we had an independence issue or we had a scope limitation. We couldn't get all the evidence we wanted to. And the problem with the disclaimer is a disclaimer of opinion means that the statements are unaudited, okay? And public companies have to be audited, so they have to kind of almost start over with somebody else if they get a disclaimer of opinion. All right. So here in the pink are our 2 questions for the week, okay? The 2 questions for the week, all right? So week 5, question 1 will be nice and short, right? Who is the auditor's report addressed? All right, that's going to be what the board of directors and the shareholders. All right, and then this one here, the 4 sections. Question week 5, question 2 will be the one here below it. Okay, identify the 4 sections of the standard report for a non-public entity. Again, we highlight those. Okay, right there. Okay, and you can just list the title. You don't have to do any of the definition. Just list the 4 sections. So that'd be nice and easy. So this lets me know that you went out there and watched the video and reached out to me for a touch, right? All right. So there are your 2 questions that they're already in Blackboard for you to answer. Okay. Now, what happens when we have it's not always clean opinion. Okay. So what goes on? Let's get in the first case. Let's say our first instance is there is a departure from GAAP, all right? So one of their accounting principles does not quite sync up with GAAP, all right? So here's our little flow chart for a GAAP departure. Okay, the first thing is it material? If it's a non-material GAAP departure, then we don't worry about it. Clean opinion, all right? If it is a material GAAP departure, then we have to say, is it pervasive? In other words, can it change your opinion of the statements, or can it change the opinion of some people of the statements? Okay? And if that answer is yes, then we give the negative opinion. And if it's no, then we would highlight it as a qualified thing. In other words, this is big and we need to point it out, but because it's not pervasive, the rest of it still looks good. Okay? And here is a qualified opinion with a GAAP departure here in blue. In other words, so when we get to the opinion section, all right, we have this paragraph. In other words, why we're doing a qualified opinion. And then here's the qualified opinion. In our opinion, except for the effects in essentially the previous paragraph, the statements are fair. Okay. Now so this would be if it was a GAAP departure that is not pervasive. Now if it was pervasive, then we got to give the adverse opinion, right? So here would be that same paragraph, that why we're going to give an adverse opinion. Okay. Then down here, in our opinion, because of the significance of the matter discussed in the previous paragraph, the statements do not present fairly the financial position. So that would be the adverse report or opinion. Okay. Scope limitations. Okay, scope limitations. Now, the scope limitation essentially is there's a few things can go on here. 2 situations that can create them. Essentially, it's when the auditor is unable to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence. Okay, it can come from management's deliberate refusal. Okay, and that would be a client-imposed scope limitation. The second thing could be a circumstance. Okay, circumstances beyond the auditor's and client's control. Okay, so if you, like it says, a late appointment. So if you signed up to be the auditor, after year end, clearly you're going to have trouble. You're going to have trouble observing inventory because it should have already been done, right? And so that would be where you might have that client-imposed circumstance-imposed limitation because of the fact we signed up late. We can't do some of the things that we wanted to do. Okay. Scope limitations. All right. So here, let's look at our scenarios here for scope limitations. Our little flow chart. First, is it material? Okay. If it's not, then we can still go standard. Okay. If it was something that we wanted to do, but we ended up being not a material account, big deal. Clean opinion. All right, so now let's say yes, it is in fact material. Okay, now are there alternate procedures available? Okay, and if there's a yes, then we can use alternate procedures to, we wanted to do this test, we can't. We found another way to do it, and we're comfortable with it. We can still give a clean opinion. All right. Then if it's no way to recreate it, then they say, well, okay, now is this a pervasive scope limitation? If no, we can do qualified. If yes, look, disclaimer of, okay? So it means we cannot give an opinion. So this is much better than this. Remember, the disclaimer is it's not been audited, so therefore they would have to still continue finding a new auditor to try to get the statements audited. Okay, so there's your scope limitation flow chart for the review. It's on whatever page this is. 549, okay? And then you can look at the reports again. One being the qualified opinion. There's that qualified paragraph. Let's look at the disclaimer, though, okay? This was engaged, right? We were engaged to audit, okay? It's our responsibility to express an opinion based on conducting the audit in accordance with the GAS. Because of the matter described in the disclaimer of paragraph, we are not able to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence to provide basis for our audit opinion. And then where does it say down here? Anything else? Accordingly, we do not express an opinion on these statements. So right there, bang. Okay. All right. I got a barking dog now. All right, now we're going to go to the... actually, I looked at this earlier. I think I'm going to kind of skip this audit of group statements. Okay, you can kind of come through here and look at this. Essentially, if we're going to take responsibility for the group's work, then we can still do standard. Okay, you can look at this later by yourself. All right, there are a couple more things real quick, and that is emphasis of matter paragraphs. Okay, these are bigger than the other matters. Okay. So, consistency. Okay, what does that mean? It means if we change from one gap method to a different gap method, something like maybe if we went from LIFO to FIFO, or we went from LIFO to weighted average cost for inventory, that would be a consistency issue, right? We changed accounting methods. We went from one gap method to another gap method, all right? But the consistency from year to year has changed. Okay, and you see it right there. Changes in accounting principles from one gap method to another. All right, this could be also changes in form of the reporting entity. Maybe there's a consolidation or whatever reason that would cause that, and you can read the other methods there. So if there's a consistency issue, then if we can still give a clean opinion, and we'll have a paragraph in there that spells out that consistency issue, okay? Just to kind of highlight that to the users of the statements. And going concerns another one. Remember we discussed this last chapter a little bit. It means the entity is expected to... the going concern principle means that the entity should continue into the future. Okay? And so if there's a going concern... uncertainty, then we're not certain that the because the financial performance is so bad, we're worried that the company will not survive much longer into the future. Hence the opinion on what does it say here? Hence, an opinion that financial statements are in accordance with GAAP means that the continued existence may be presumed for a reasonable time, not to exceed 1 year beyond the financial statements. Date of the statements. All right. Well, anyway, for very severe going concern uncertainties, professional standards indicate the auditors may issue a disclaimer opinion with the auditor's report providing all substantive reasons for the disclaimer. All right, so that's going to give us some guidelines of what to do here. There is some other issues in here as well. This going concern thing, management should already be aware of it. To be honest, okay. So management should know, hey, we're struggling. And management should also have plans in place to try to get the company through the next few years. Maybe they're just, in a lull. They're trying to get them out of that lull or out of that ditch into a better area. Okay? And based on management's plans, that can affect our opinion. Okay? So in other words, if we feel there's a going concern issue, but management has a sound plan in place, then we can still give a clean opinion without really referring to that uncertainty. Is that not in here somewhere? I thought there was examples in here. I don't see them though. What does this say? The following paragraph is an excerpt from the 2016's Deloitte & Touche. Okay, so this must be an uncertainty. Yeah, this is some official wording. The accompanying consolidated financial statements have been prepared, assuming that the company will continue as a going concern. As discussed in Note 1 to the financial statements, the uncertainty of the outcome of these matters raises substantial doubt of the company's ability to continue as a going concern. Management's plans concerning these matters is discussed in Notes 1, 3, and 4 to the consolidated statement. So that Note 1 may be some sort of a legal action against them that they may not be in favor of them winning it. So it depends on what it is. Okay, so these additional paragraphs will provide emphasis of the matters. Okay, so the two, I don't even know if we really go into other matter paragraphs. What's important here is the emphasis of matters, which is consistency and going concern uncertainties. Okay, read down through the rest of this page here, and you'll be good to go. All right. Then we get to we're not going to worry about consolidated, and that gets us to our summary. So let's look real quick at a couple questions. A couple other things here. I've got the final exam is there, but you can't take it yet. Okay, you can't take it until Tuesday of next week. Tuesday and Wednesday there'll be a window where you can take it, and you'll have 90 minutes to complete it. Okay, so once you start, don't stop. Right, that's one of those commercials or something like that. Once you start, you can't. That's Pringles, right? You eat one, you can't put it down. Anyway. So you can start as early as like 1 a.m. on Tuesday morning. Okay, some of you seem to be up that late, so some of the emails I'm getting, but regardless, there's a study guide. Okay, so so here's the deal. There's 50 questions on the exam. All right. I made a pool of 75 questions, and that's what the study guide is those 75 questions. Okay, so you can work through that study guide as much as you want. Okay, once you take the exam, random selection of 50 of those questions will be your exam. Okay, and everybody will get a different 50. Okay, so you're able to go through the study guide. You can memorize them as much as you want, and then once it's your turn to take the final, or whenever you're ready to take the final, you'll get 50 of those 75 questions. So that's your final exam. You can see it. It's locked. The locks come off very early on Tuesday morning of next week, and you'll have until the following day at midnight to finish it, okay? So the 29th at midnight. Because on the 30th, let me double check that date. Thursday the 30th, yeah, I have to get my grades all put in. Okay. And then you see the quiz is already there. Okay, so you can do the quiz once you get done. You can do it as early as you want to. The Unit 5 exam is there. It's in the wrong order. Let me fix it real quick. Quick drag. We'll fix that. All right, I like that better. Is that the right amount of points? I think I fixed this, didn't I? Yeah. Okay. So we got some Unit 5 work to finish up this week. But let's look at. So you got to do what before Monday night? You got to do the quiz, the exam, then you can work on the study guide. Okay. Also the Learn Smart. All right. So here we go. In the chapter questions here, there's only a few of them. 6 on that. It's not worth points. It says it's worth points. It's not. You know that. Okay. So I got 6 questions. Okay. And then we'll be done. Make myself a little bigger. All right. Auditors found that the entity has not capitalized a material amount of leases in the statements. Okay, so that's definitely a material thing. When considering the materiality of this departure from GAAP, the auditors would choose between which reporting options. Okay, so it's a GAAP departure. GAAP departure. Let's go. Let's look at it in the book. We'll be official here. Okay. Our 2 possible answers: qualified opinion if it's non-pervasive, and adverse if it's pervasive. So that's the answer, right? So qualified or adverse. Okay. Straightforward. All right. Number 2. The auditors determined that the entity is suffering financial difficulties and its going concern is seriously in doubt. Okay, that's what emphasis of matter. Okay, so let's see if we got to do it or not. Let's see. Assuming that the intended entity adequately disclosed this matter in the statements, the auditors must choose between which of the following report alternatives. Without looking, I'm thinking clean report with the emphasis of matter paragraph, I would think. And then disclaimer of would be the second, right? So it's not adverse. This one looks good. Unmodified or clean opinion with a reference to going concern. Ooh, this one could be good too, though. I think it's this one here. Unmodified opinion and a disclaimer of. Let's check my work. I don't want to get it wrong. There we go. At some point, you can not put in the emphasis of matter. And I'm not sure what that is. I can't remember. But anyway, that one's good. I second guess. What this is a second guess myself. I shouldn't do that, right? That was round the money the first time. Which of the following statements is true with respect to the audit examinations for reports for public and non-public? Well, they're the same. They're the same, except the public has an extra paragraph that talks about the internal control audit, because you got to do it for public, right? So let's look. Auditors are required to express an opinion on internal control in the audit of non-public, but not for public. That sounds backwards, right? That's not true, so this is supposed to be it. But let's look at the other ones. The reports express an opinion. That's right. So they both express an opinion. Audit examination for non-public entities are based on user demand, but based on legislation requirements for public. That sounds right. In other words, non-public don't have to get audits. They're not, they're not held. They're not under the guidance of the SEC. Number 4, management is responsible for the fairness of the statements for both. That's correct as well. So the first answer is definitely the right one. Okay, they're backwards. So number 4, when auditors wish to issue an unmodified opinion but highlight that the entity has changed its methods of accounting for software development. They would most appropriately identify the change. So that's a consistency issue, right? And we'll use an emphasis on matter paragraph to highlight that. Okay. Now remember, the management should already put that in the footnotes that we changed methods for software development costs, and we're just going to emphasize that and make sure people are aware of it. Okay, number 5. Which of the following conditions can a disclaimer of opinion never be issued? Never be issued. Okay. Auditors have determined that the entity uses NIFO, next in, first out. Okay, so that's a non-GAAP method. So that's a GAAP departure. We'll look at that in a minute. The entity's going concern problems are highly material and pervasive. Remember, that's one thing that we can do, right? So we can actually do that. Okay, so if it's a severe enough going concern issue, then we can disclaim. Number 3, auditors own stock in the company. That would be a independence issue, so you can definitely disclaim there. And then the last one, the entity does not allow auditors to have access to evidence about important accounts. That's a scope limitation, and that can also come to a disclaimer. Remember, when you're talking about a GAAP departure, that's right here, your only possible issue, you can't, there's no disclaimer of here. It's a standard report if it's not material, not pervasive, it's qualified, pervasive, it'd be adverse. So that's the answer. And then finally, which of the following is not included in the standard report? Okay, the standard report. Let's see. Description of the audit. Identification of the statements being audited. That's going to be in there. An opinion that the statements are fair presentation of GAAP. That sounds good. The emphasis of matter paragraph. Okay, that would not be in the standard report. It may be added to it when you have an emphasis of matter issue, but it's not in the standard report. Okay. So some easy questions for our end of the chapter there. All right, guys. So remember, get your week questions put in. Those were addressed here earlier in the broadcast, and get all caught up on the work. You got until Monday night to get all that stuff in. You've got exam review up there, and the exam will be available next Tuesday, very, very early in the morning, like 1 a.m. So if you want to be a night owl, you can essentially take it Monday very, very late at night. And you'll have until Wednesday at midnight to complete it. Okay. Obviously, I wish this wasn't the circumstances for a class. Some of you guys are going to be moving on from getting your diplomas and moving on. I wish you all the best. Best of luck. And I know there's at least one person that's moving out of state. I hope you enjoy the new adventure that you're going to be going on to in your life. I'll be praying for you. I'll be praying for all my class students. And hopefully I'll see the majority of you in the fall. We'll definitely see some of you in the fall. The ones that I don't see, then I definitely wish you all the best. It's been a great semester. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me with email. If it's too much of a question to answer through email, I'll actually have you call me. I'll give you my number to call me so we can talk it out if we need to. God bless, and we will hopefully see a lot of you in the fall. Until then, goodbye.